Pregame.com.
Good evening, Pregame.tv. Bryan Leonard here along with me, Brady Kannon, and we're talking college football this time around. We're going to go to the Pac-12. A new member of the Pac-12 in the last couple years, the Utes of Utah out of Salt Lake City, will be hosting the Ducks of Oregon, fresh off of their victory over Stanford last weekend in very impressive fashion. And Utah, I tell you, this is a very tough football team. One of the real good football teams that's not really showing up in the standings in the Pac-12 conference, in the Pac-12 South to be specific. I believe they're, let's see here, 3-2 in conference, but 6-2 overall, and losing a heartbreaker last week to Arizona State, another great club. This Pac-12 is pretty loaded, and a good one you're looking at here with Oregon visiting Utah.
Yeah, when Utah left the Mountain West, I thought they'd really struggle moving up in class. Obviously, the Mountain West is more of a passing offensive conference. They don't play a whole lot of defense out here in the Mountain West. But the Pac-12 is basically the same thing lately.
It's a Mountain West on steroids.
It definitely is, and this is a program that's just as good as a lot of the others in there, and they've been pretty impressive. And you know, you take a look at the Oregon game last week. That was huge for them to beat Stanford. And I was really surprised that line went as down low as it did. A lot of people were on Stanford in that game. But Stanford this year just doesn't seem to be nearly as physical as they had been in the past, offensively or defensively. And they started passing the ball a little bit more lately. And I thought Oregon would have an easier time this year than they had in the past.
You know, maybe Stanford was thinking, if there's one weakness with this Oregon team, maybe it's a little bit on defense. If we can throw the ball into that secondary. It seems like the Stanford defense has been down a bit from where they were last year. I think overall Stanford is down a little bit. And and it was evidenced against Oregon. I mean, they've really had Oregon's number the last couple of years. And then Utah, you know, it kind of took them, it seems like, a couple of years to get used to this Pac-12 thing, but very impressive so far.
Yeah, definitely. And or as I said, that was a huge monkey off their back. And you add into that now that they moved up in the top four in the rankings, and that means basically if they could just win out, they're going to the playoffs.
Easier said than done in the Pac-12.
Definitely is.
I tell you, this Arizona State team just continues to surprise me, man. I don't know how good they are, but all they do is win games.
There's some good teams over there in the Pac-12, and unfortunately, the people on the East Coast, which is what I used to be, you don't get to see a lot of those games because they come on long past my bedtime.
I know. I remember being on a trip last summer, and I'm trying to watch a game, and pretty soon it's midnight. I'm going, gosh, I can't live over here.
Yeah. Well, I got guys out here in Las Vegas that don't want to bet a Hawaii game because they don't have to stay up and watch it. I said, you do know they're going to play the game without you watching it. You can read about it in the morning, you know.
So you ready to make this one official?
Let's make this official.
All right.
Huge win last week for Oregon. Obviously, beating Stanford was huge for them, and this was really their best chance to do so. Now they're playing a Utah team that is very similar to the way the Stanford teams were in the past. They're very good on both lines. They're a very physical team. So now they get that big monkey off their back. They get into the top four. Now they got to go on the road in Utah. And this Utah team right now, there's expected to be their biggest sellout in the history of Utah, and they moved this game tonight. So this is going to be a huge game for Utah, their biggest game probably since they've gone to the Pac-12, and they're getting to take on an Oregon team here, ranked in the top four. Big game here for Utah. I think they give them the type of game we expected out of Stanford last week. And this is not a good matchup for Oregon, in my opinion. Utah does have some injuries. That's always a concern. But for Oregon to come off of that huge game last week and everything that happened in the off week, or excuse me, in the standings, to get up to where they wanted to get, and now they got to go back on the road and they got to win this game by a margin. I bet 10 on the opening line. I knew I'd never see that 10 again. We're looking anywhere in Vegas here from 7.5 to 9.5. I expect it to land somewhere in that area. As long as it's over 7, this is an excellent play here on Utah. It's 7 or less of a play on Utah. But this would not surprise me at all if Utah pulls off this upset. This is one of those games that teams circle, and you get the big team coming to town off of that game last week against Stanford. Utah's got this game circled. This is their biggest game of the season. This is their coming out party. I like the Utes here getting over a touchdown against Oregon, the public team.
You know, and you could also make a case for the fact that Utah last week against Arizona State was looking ahead to this game you talk about that's been circled on their schedule. And, it seems like all eyes and attention and focus is going to be on this one for Oregon. It's also, I think, instrumental in your play here on Utah, the fact that Oregon did get into that top 4. I mean, we've seen it with college basketball. As soon as a team makes it into the top 25, they tank the next game. And
definitely. And people talk about style points. Well, you're already in there. You don't need to worry about style points. So, and teams start, when they get to that point where they're in that situation, we saw that with Florida State. Florida State knows if they just win out, they're going to make it.
Yeah.
So they play a little bit conservative. And you don't want a conservative team when you're laying over a touchdown. And that's the problem with Florida State. All season long, they know as long as we win out, we're going to make it. We're
going to see if Oregon realizes how tough this Utah team is. If they do, and they win this by a couple of touchdowns, we're going to know that that team's for real.
Well, they're for real, no doubt about it.
And I agree, they are for real. But if they can do this on the road and do it convincingly, look out.
Yeah, unlike some of the conferences out there, they've got some really good teams in the Pac-12, and winning on the road is not easy.
And I think, a couple of weeks ago, this would have even looked better, and you probably would have had a different line. But Oregon's getting healthier, and that's helping them as well.
It definitely is. Their offensive line, they had some injuries early in the season. Now the offense is back to where it should be. But the matchup situation with the Lions here, I think gives Utah a real shot at winning.
It's a lot of points.
It is a lot of points.
I don't disagree with you. And those points could be reflective of where Utah is in the standings. We talked about it. They're a better team than 4th in the Pac-12 South.
Yeah, they're a good football team that goes under the radar.
Yep, absolutely. That's going to do it for our Tuesday videos here on pregame.tv. Bryan Leonard, along with myself, Brady Kannon, will be back again next week to talk some college and professional football. Enjoy your week. We appreciate it. It's pregame.tv.